Looks like Kara's here.
Hi, Stormy. Sorry.
Hi, no worries. Do you want to go ahead and bring us to order?
Yes, I would like to bring the January 22nd meeting of the Bond Accountability Committee to order. Start with introductions of the BAC like we normally do. Perfect. My name is Kara Toronto. I'm the BAC chair. I've been in the chair role for I think 2-ish years and on the committee for 4. And I will hand it over to Greg because that's who I see next on my screen.
Greg DiLoretto, been a member since 2020. This is my second term on the BAC, and I'm a retired chief executive from the Tuolumne Valley Water District.
Norm.
Good evening, everyone. Norm Dowdy, and I've been here about a little over around 4 years, I believe. Let's go with, you want to just go with Jonathan?
Perfect.
Hi everyone, Jonathan Trett. I have been on the committee roughly 2 years. I am the Director of Development at Home Forward. We are the housing authority for Multnomah County. We have about 7,000 units of affordable rental housing.
I don't see Ryan. Is that correct?
I don't either. I think I got an acceptance from him, so um, maybe if he does show up, we'll give him a chance to introduce himself.
Perfect. I think with that, the next question is, do we have any public comment?
We do have new members of the committee here today, though.
Okay, I was curious about that. Sorry, I did not get a chance to read the board packets. My apologies. So, would you like to call on the new members, Stormy?
Yes, for sure. Let's start with Chris Dunning.
Yeah, thank you, Stormy, and good afternoon, members. It's really great to meet you. My name is Chris Dunning. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Energy Trust of Oregon. I have 3 daughters that are in PPS, 1 at Selwood Middle and 2 at Llewellyn. So just really excited to be part of the greater PPS community and to be starting off my membership of the committee. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Jesse, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Denham. I am currently a capital projects manager with the City of Portland on the facilities team. I work in the Bureau of Fleet and Facilities. I've been with the city about 1 year, and I was in architecture for a little over 20 years prior to that. I also have 2 children, young children in PPS, and I look forward to making a contribution.
Thank you. Travis.
Hey everybody, nice to see you all, meet some of you virtually. I'm the current Director of Capital Finance and Treasury at the Port of Portland. I've been here about 4 years, and before that was the debt manager at a water and wastewater utility in the Bay Area. And then before that was a bond rating analyst at Moody's. And started my career at Bonneville Power Administration here in Portland, also in their debt and treasury group. So my whole career is kind of focused on capital finance stuff and debt and bonds and all of that good stuff. And I've been on a couple of these kind of citizen oversight committees in the past down in the Bay Area. So familiar with a lot of this kind of activity and happy to be here and a part of this group, and look forward to getting to know you all and working with you. And I am also a PPS parent.
Travis, this is Greg. Were you at East Bay Mud down in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Thank you. Annie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Kwan. I am coming from the architecture industry side. I'm an architect, born and raised in Portland, left after high school, and cut my teeth on the East Coast, and namely New York, for the past 20 years. But COVID brought me back to my hometown, and our daughter is now in kindergarten in PPS. And so it's great to be here and able to contribute to this community, and looking forward to working with you all.
And Ryan, now that you're here, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good to see everybody. My name is Ryan Kinsella. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Capital Asset Management for Oregon Metro. Gosh, I've been in Portland since '99. Went to school at the University of Portland and then have been around and actually spent a lot of time at the city of Portland, working my way up to budget and finance there, and a small stint at PBOT before I came over to Metro. So been part of the group for about 2 years now. Good to see everyone.
Stormy, just for my clarification, does that mean we have 9 members total and that everyone is here?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
And I'll introduce myself and then I'll ask one other PPS person here to introduce themselves, and then the remaining will introduce themselves when they present later in the meeting. I'm Stormy Shanks. I'm the Senior Director of the Office of School Modernization, and I want to turn it over to Dan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Young, and I'm Chief Operating Officer at Portland Public Schools. Am I supposed to go through the list?
Oh, no. Everybody else will introduce themselves as they present. So I think that's all for introductions.
Are you still having issues viewing the participant panels, Stormy? I might have a quick fix.
I can see who's in the meeting now.
Oh, okay, perfect. All right, thanks.
Okay, we do have one public comment for today. Derek or Johnny, can you admit the public commenter?
Admitted.
All right, John Charles, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, you are on for public comment.
Great. I guess my video is not on, huh?
We don't see your video. That's true.
Well, maybe it doesn't matter. My name is John Charles, and I'm president of Cascade Policy Institute, a nonprofit policy research organization. And I've followed the bond measures over the last couple of years very closely. I've watched all the committee meetings. I've watched some of your meetings as a committee, and I thank all of you on the BAC for your service because it's a hard job. I want to raise a couple issues tonight. One is the Center for Black Student Excellence. As you know, after 4 years, no bond money has been spent, and no public outreach meetings were held in 2024. And in the May 2024 audit that I think you're going to look at tonight, summarizes the situation on page 33 as follows. The risk remains that the CBSE will not be delivered on schedule or as intended. I think we are past the point of merely speculating about the risk. We already know that it hasn't been delivered as promised. In fact, no one at PPS that I've talked to can even explain the who, what, where, why, or how of the CBSE. The Bond Accountability Committee is authorized in its charter to provide feedback and/or advice to the board about, quote, whether the projects are being delivered on schedule relative to the voter-approved bonds. I encourage you, the BAC, to make a formal recommendation to the board that it begin the process of reallocating the $60 million to other capital projects that could be implemented immediately. On Jefferson High School, the voters approved the budget of $311 million. This was raised to $366 million, raised again to $491 million. Only 15% of it has been spent. There is no new school. In December, the superintendent told the board that the budget was being reduced to $366 million again, but without showing any kind of math or methodology. And there are no specific numbers in the 2025 bond. It's very vague. So this to me looks a lot like the 2017 experience where costs were lowballed. And I think you should look into that in some depth. My final point is the marginal cost of the board's so-called climate policy. At the March 2024 F&O committee meeting, board member Julia Brim Edwards said, how much will the all-electric policy cost with regard to Jefferson? And the response from Anderson Construction tonight was, we are not prepared to answer that question tonight. Director Green raised the same question again on December 2nd. So what's the answer? This applies to all 3 remaining high schools, and these costs of going all electric are likely to be material. Why has this information not been why has it not been distributed to the public or the board for that matter? It should be known before proceeding with the next bond request. And I think the BAC itself should ask the question. Just want to say you do great work. I read your stuff. I watch your meetings. Unfortunately, I think your work is not being distributed enough. I think the board needs to hear from you a little more forcefully on behalf of voters. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Johnny and Derek, did we have any other public comment?
He was the only one who's signed up.
Okay. All right, our next item on the agenda is the Year 5 performance audit presentation. And so that will be done by our consultants, Schoberg Evishink. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I will let you all introduce yourselves and share your screen to do your presentation.
To get it up here, let's see. Alrighty, can everyone see that okay? Great. Okay, all right. Good evening, members of the BAC. My name is Kelly Hansen, and I'm with Schoberg Evishink Consulting, and I'm here with Kathy Brady, a partner, to present the results for the 5th annual bond performance audit, which covers the period from from April 2022 through June 2023. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a quick background on who we are and our firm. We're a certified woman-owned business founded 25 years ago by the former California State Auditor. We work exclusively with public sector clients and we're based in Sacramento. We have quite a bit of experience auditing schools and higher education institutions in addition to capital improvement projects at a variety of public entities. And we also have a team of professionals working on these bond audits, including certified construction auditors, among other certifications we hold collectively. Okay, next slide, please. So just a quick background on these bond audits, a little bit of a refresher. The audit started in 2012 and were concluded by a different auditor in 2017. It was in 2018 when PPS hired Schoberg Evishink Consulting to conduct these annual audits. At that time, we were just looking at the 2017 bond program, but it was subsequently expanded to look at the 2020 bond program as well. So all the audits we conduct follow what are called generally accepted government auditing standards, also known as GAGAS. And they just provide a framework for accountability through the many requirements, ensuring, independence, professional judgment, that we're documenting evidence, and also that we're obtaining views of responsible officials. Now, in terms of how we approach these annual audit scopes, we propose a variety of possible audit areas to OSM a few months before the audit's going to begin. And they, by contract, review and approve the areas that are going to be audited. And for each cycle, we really try to align the focus areas with what's going on in the bond program itself and various project phases, since audit resources can't cover every area in each cycle in unlimited depth. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so before we get to Year 5, let's talk about some of the prior audits and some of the scope and just high-level results. So in terms of scope for Year 1, we reviewed the 2017 cost estimates and focused on the model's assumption and cost factors used by OSM at the time when it was developed. Then also in Year 1, we reviewed planning practices, financial management, project management, and the project delivery framework. For the Year 2 audit, the second piece of the slide,
We focused on the delivery status for the health and safety program in more depth, in addition to those school modernizations where we raised concerns related to paying for increased Benson costs. We also reviewed contracting and procurement practices for the CMGC contractors, as well as OSM's construction management practices, which included things like payment approval, site inspection, schedule control. Okay, let's talk about years 3 and 4. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, in the year 3 audit, OSM asked us to primarily focus on the first of 3 equity programs. It was business equity in this particular year and on bond communications, in addition to the standard status update and audit recommendations follow-up that we do every year. And then in that next cycle, year 4, we focused on project closeout, contractor workforce equity, project performance, and a high-level review of the 2020 bond. And we did make recommendations for most of the areas in each audit cycle. Okay, let's move on to the scope of the year 5 audit in the next slide. Okay, so year 5 audit, as you can see from the slide, we focused on 5 primary areas: bond status, bond delivery status for both the 2017 and 2020 bond projects. Third and final area of equity, career learning equity, program delivery of curriculum, program delivery of technology, and then also, of course, follow up on prior year audit recommendations. Okay, so that wasn't so brief, but let's get into the details now on this next slide. Okay, the first report section. So in this section, results on the overall bond program status as well as progress made. So at the time, the 2 remaining 2017 modernization projects at Lincoln and Lincoln and Benson were on track for planned completion. In terms of cost, the 2017 bond projects we're gonna require a little bit over $1.06 billion to complete the current portfolio of projects by 2024. We found that Lincoln was under budget with an estimated $9 to $9.5 million in savings. At that time, there wasn't a decision about how those savings were going to be used or reallocated to other projects. And then in terms of Benson, estimated costs at completion had continued to increase, but they are anticipated to be covered by the 2020 bond. Yet the risk did still remain that costs could continue to grow and contingency would be stretched thin. And then for the health and safety projects, we found that PPS was still on target to complete the planned scope by the fall of 2024 at the time. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, 2020 delivery status. Okay. So let's see. This report section also discussed the overall status of the 2020 bond program that had similar elements as the 2017 program, but it added a few new bond categories related to curriculum, technology, capacity projects, and then the Center for Black Student Excellence. During the year 5 audit, the 2020 bond was mostly progressing as planned, but there were some cost, schedule, and scope challenges that did occur, although there was an intentionally large contingency available for 2020 bond overages. For instance, like Benson, Jefferson's cost estimates grew significantly, increasing from more than $55 million from the bond approved amount of $311 million to $366 million, and that was due to inflation in the construction market. And this inflation did align with third-party cost estimates we reviewed, and ultimately program contingency was allocated to cover the Jefferson cost increases. And then we also found that most of the physical improvements were on target, except for mechanical and roofing projects, which had faced some delivery challenges at the time. For mechanical, although the bond didn't identify which improvements would be made at which schools, PPS planned to do repairs at approximately 15 of its highest priority sites. But like with other projects, mechanical estimates grew significantly between 2020 and 2022. So PPS chose to provide different improvements. Instead of full system replacements at just a handful of schools, PPS decided to do system control upgrades and component replacements across more school sites. Similarly, roof projects were another area experiencing higher than expected costs, with an original budget of $65.7 million, growing by $4.9 million as of May 2023. And again, these costs were covered by program contingency. So while PPS may have not delivered as much as internally and initially planned for, that investment in those mechanical and roof categories, its physical improvements did align with the 2020 bond intent. And then I'm going to skip curriculum and technology for now, since we go into it in a little bit more detail in later slides. But let's talk about capacity. So for the capacity bond category, 10 million was set aside for improvements, but the bond didn't designate specific capital projects or unique sites. Yet for one of those sites subsequently selected for capacity improvements as a high risk school, that was Harrison Park Middle School, we found significant scope increases resulting in higher than expected costs. More specifically, initial allocations of 4 million at Harrison Park skyrocketed to about 42.6 million as of July 2023. And that was mainly because of the additional work that was needed to meet those middle school education specifications. And then to cover costs, PPS allocated funds from other 2020 bond categories, mechanical, security, and technology, since some of those upgrades were already planned for Harrison, with the rest coming from the contingency funds. The 2020 bond also set aside 60 million for the Center for Black Student Excellence, CBSE, but at the time of that audit in 2023, no money had been spent on CBSE, and it was 2 years behind schedule from those baseline plans. PPS had engaged the CBSE community in program design, but these efforts had not yet progressed to the phase detailing exactly what capital improvements would be made, where they would occur, and when they would be implemented for the CBSE bond area. The community engagement portion did take a bit longer than planned, and the risk remains that CBSE won't be delivered on schedule or as intended. Lastly, there was also 2020 money for the planning and design of Cleveland and Ida B. Wells. At the time of the Year 5 audit, efforts were on schedule and on budget, so not a whole lot to say there. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, let's talk about career learning equity. So moving on to this next report section, we audited equity area, the Career Learning Equity Program. And that program had the objective to expand the number of young people of color and young women participating in a variety of new career learning programs. So to implement that program, PPS's executive leadership issued an administrative directive that highlighted 4 main responsibilities. Number 1 being to register contractors and offer learning opportunities. Number 2, to coordinate with contractors to plan, schedule, and conduct learning activities. Number 3, to manage, track, and report on contractor and student participation. And lastly, number 4, to develop processes to expand the program to middle school. Yet we found that PPS had not established or implemented a structured program to meet those responsibilities, and we couldn't determine whether the ultimate equity objectives were met. So specifically to discuss results, there was no structure, first of all, in place to assist or delegate specific roles and responsibilities that led to some uncertainty on who was responsible for what. And then number 2, there were also insufficient protocols or clear procedures, which caused inaction on key responsibilities. Some data and reporting duties were assigned to the career and technical education staff in partnership with PPS's procurement and contracting team. But many critical program functions such as contract management and compliance, program coordination, and data tracking and management didn't occur. Okay, we did find some career learning examples. For instance, a woman-owned architectural firm provided 5-week internships for 6 students, and a general contractor provided construction management classes in another instance. Yet, because there were no targets or measurement of outcomes and no meaningful data captured, PPS couldn't determine if it met that equity objective. We did make some recommendations related to that, 2 recommendations. The first being for PPS to research and assign the resources needed to implement a structured program with all the elements that we mentioned were missing. So clearly designated roles and responsibilities, protocols for contractor management, data management, reporting, and then set targets to track those outcomes. And we also mentioned that, if PPS couldn't do that, it could alternately revise the administrative directive to limit the program to more appropriately align with the district's capacity at the time. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now we'll get into the curriculum deep dive that we did. Okay, so we did deep dives for both curriculum and technology. So, a little bit of background. For several decades, PPS reported significant need for technology upgrades and new curriculum, as it had been out of compliance with the Oregon Department of Education standards for various subjects, with some subjects even being non-compliant since the early 90s. And while the language in the bond didn't promise specific quantities or improvements or name specific sites where, these curriculum and technology improvements would occur, PPS did plan a variety of activities to meet those needs using bond funds. So for curriculum's foundational framework, we found that PPS's Office of Teaching and Learning, otherwise known as OTL, had established a good foundation to help manage and monitor curriculum bond funds with established roles and responsibilities. They had documented analysis for decision making. They had tools and systems to monitor funds, oversee delivery, track progress. So that was positive. And we also found that OTL established protocols to keep end users aware of those improvements planned. They did things like working closely with teachers as part of the curriculum selection and allowing the educators to be familiarized with specific materials before teaching the actual curriculum. In terms of delivery status, the curriculum's timeline aligned with the baseline schedule and no notable changes in scope occurred, nor were there any major schedule delays. However, some curriculum spending needed additional funding. As of February 2023, OTL had spent about 71% of allocated bond funds and was expected to expend all curriculum bond money by fall 2024. However, there was an additional $14 million of general funds that was needed to pay for non-compensable expenses related to a variety of cost, professional development for teachers, extended work hours, student field test materials. So the budgets for those non-compensable costs were redistributed to other curriculum categories, including humanities, digital toolkit, and mathematics, and PPS did remain on track to deliver curriculum in its full commitment. In terms of performance metrics, specific outcome measures looking at before and after of the curriculum improvements hadn't yet occurred at the time of the audit, but OTL did have plans in place to measure success through standardized test scores, stakeholder feedback, and electronic material utilization in the future. Okay, let's talk about the technology deep dive next. Okay, so we found much of the same things that we did in curriculum. So similar to curriculum, technology had a structure in place to guide delivery and had established a framework that applied, documented analysis-driven methods to make delivery decisions that, best prioritize school needs and were based on factors like building schematics, existing infrastructure, historically underserved communities were more of a priority, and then other factors just to, group and prioritize schools by needs. As far as the delivery status, so again, like curriculum, the bond didn't promise or plan specific quantities of purchases or improvements at specific sites. But Otis did, in fact, detail the types of technology improvements it did intend to deliver. So as of the year 5 audit, those technology improvements were generally progressing as planned, but some schedule and scope were impacted in addition to some non-bond compensable expenditures like curriculum, which required general fund coverage. So specifically, Otis experienced challenges in classroom technology that led to a 1-year delay as of May 2023. This delay related to planned whiteboards that were to be wall mounted over existing boards. Then PPS thought the design would be better if the existing boards were removed, but the removal would have required abatement of environmental hazards, which would have then increased the budget and delayed the schedule further. So ultimately, PPS chose to install ceiling mounted projectors with pull down screens in front of existing whiteboards to mitigate that cost. Okay, well, the scope, was different from the original internal plans. The alternative still aligned with that intent. With the cost challenges and then looking at cost high level, as of May 2023, Otis had spent over half of its available funds. And that was generally commensurate with delivery progress, 3 years into the estimated 5-year delivery plan. And additionally, Otis did make notable progress with its purchase of more than 80,000 individual devices, with 90% of those 80,000 devices being made available to students. Like curriculum, there was also $11 million in technology planned expenses that were subsequently deemed non-compensable, mostly related to the planning of PPS's enterprise resource planning replacement system, although general funds were used to cover those costs. As far as performance, we found that performance measurement efforts were still in progress at the time of our audit, although measuring success of technology improvements is inherently challenging. That said, metrics being considered include outputs such as, counts of desktop, laptops, and monitors, in addition to bandwidth performance and internet speed improvements. So far, Otis has reported improved internet speed, and that network outages have been reduced as well. So overall, for both curriculum and technology, at the time of the Year 5 audit, commitments were generally being delivered according to plan and in line with bond pledges. So we didn't have any recommendations in these areas. Okay, let's go to the next slide, prior audit follow-up. Okay, so this is an area we do each year. So we included in Year 5 as well, a follow-up on prior audit recommendations. Although OSM reiterated its commitment to addressing recommendations, there wasn't much evidence of progress made since that prior audit in 2022. So getting into some statistics, in total, there have been about 50 audit recommendations from the past 4 performance audits since 2019. As of May 2023, there are about half, or 27, that were still outstanding. Most of those outstanding recommendations were from Year 3 and Year 4 audits, as not as much time had passed, and PPS did assert that 2 recommendations couldn't be addressed until 2017 projects close out and new CMGC projects commence. For instance, of the 10 Year 4 recommendations, 4 related specifically to the CBSE program that needed quite a few improvements, such as establishing framework for management and clear and staffing with clear roles and responsibilities, an updated implementation schedule with targets, a plan for capital purchases, and then a structure to monitor progress against plans. There were also 8 recommendations related to the business and workforce equity programs, and then another 8 project delivery recommendations related to change orders, contracting language, for paying contractors, value engineering, design deviations, and reporting of other performance metrics. Although a BAC report issued in May of 2023 mentioned that PPS had closed out several recommendations since the fiscal year 2022 audit report, we couldn't verify that progress because OSM didn't provide documentation timely. Let's go on to slide 12. Okay, looking ahead. This is the Year 6 audit, which is currently in progress. So for this audit, we're going to be looking at the 2017 and 2020 bond status and prior audit recommendations. But we're also going to be looking at 2020 physical facility infrastructure projects, as well as staffing and bond oversight. This is still in progress, so we can't share additional details here, but just wanted to give you a bit of an idea. So let's go on to the last slide. With that, I would like to open it up for questions. I also have a partner on the line with Schoberg Evershank Consulting. Her name's Kathy Brady, and she's been overseeing these audits for the last several years. So looks like Greg has a question.
Yeah, great presentation. And I noticed in this audit, there really aren't any recommendations for the most part, which is, I think, good news for Portland Public Schools. But when you did this final slide, you talked about we've got, I don't know, 54% of them done, right? And that's still quite a few to be done. So I wonder if you have taken the time or somebody to prioritize what's left to do. I mean, some are going to be more important than others, and I wonder if there's a need for us to prioritize which one of those recommendations we got to get done, because the staff's trying to do those as well as try to get projects built and money, and all the things that they have to do. And so has anybody talked about prioritizing those remaining, whatever it is, 46% or whatever?
Greg, is that a question for OSM, or if we, the auditors, would prioritize the recommendations?
Yeah, at least the ones I've seen before, it's just a whole list of recommendations. Are there any priorities you think are more important for us to be successful than others? So it is a question for you.
Previously, we have never categorized them by priority. We do, though, always try to provide recommendations that we think are feasible, implementable, that aren't going to be, that are realistic. Kathy, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, we don't often do it like Kelly said, but we have done it for other clients. It takes a little bit more work to, sort of identify what, a high priority means, a critical priority. Sometimes it's on the path of the bond. It can be challenging because it's such different areas in the bond. So is CBSE more important than, Benson? But, that is something that we could do. It might be more challenging on the past ones to go back and look at it, but we're on year 6 now, so you're sort of starting to see what might be more important. So that's something that we'll consider this year. Maybe we can work with. It's not just OSM. The 2017 started with OSM, but now it's involving so many other areas outside of OSM. So maybe we can talk with Dan and see what we can do with those for this year.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Greg. Any other questions?
I'll ask another one. That's what happens when you've been on the committee a long time. You start. So, you had a little, we heard a comment from a citizen this evening and regarding the Center for Black Student Excellence. And you had a little recommendation. And so maybe this really isn't so much for you, but you did have sort of a recommendation. And I guess the question is, where are we going to go with that? Maybe that's more for Stormy and Dan than for you folks, but it does raise the issue. We got $60 million sitting there. And I am reminded of the conversation at the board meeting the other night with the Center for Native American Student Excellence and where the board went with that. And so you just had the one recommendation that we're not going to meet the timeline or the budget. And I guess that's the extent of what your work would be, right, Kelly?
Right. And we also had a recommendation related to, creating a framework, designating clear roles. I think that's probably what you're referring to. Yeah, that was the recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah, I can give a little bit of an update on the developments around the CBSE as a program and kind of what work they do. The district has, since the last time BAC met, has hired a director of the CBSE, and that part of that director's job is to define that and to complete the implementation plan and the management plan and create a vision and a structure for the CBSE as a program. So that means what kind of work are they going to do? What's the operational plan for that program? What kinds of staff will be there? And then that allows us to interpret that into a space program. What kind of facility is going to accommodate and just actually facilitate that program, the work they do, and the staff that they're hiring. So I believe in the near future, the CBSE director will be providing a public update to the board. I don't have a date for when that will be on the board agenda, but I do know that that work is largely complete. It needs to be communicated to the public, though.
Okay, it looks like we have another question from Jonathan.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a question for OSM and Stormy. I don't think it's very fair to put this on you because I know you're new to OSM. Maybe it's more for Dan, but it relates to the career equity goals. And I'm just wondering if in the course of selecting CMGC contractors for these large projects, there's ever been any discussion about building those kind of career goals into the contracts. Like I'm used to seeing goals around hours performed by apprentices and then sub goals around women and people of color. And
yes.
So I'm just wondering if that's something that OSM has discussed before or might consider doing in the future towards meeting that goal.
So there are 3 aspects to our business equity program. One is equity in contracting. Another is career learning equity, and the other is workforce equity. So Are you talking about the business, all three of those as a group or one in particular?
So I'm now remembering the reports, and I do remember now seeing hours about workforce hours. I guess what I'm
Yeah.
it's not the best formulated question, but I mean, there's something about creating a pipeline of especially of young folks who may not be headed to a 4-year college,
Yes.
who could be headed for the trades and really well-paying careers. And so I
Yes.
guess I'm really wondering more about what kind of connections can be made visa, these hundreds of millions of dollars of work for the students. I know that was the initial goal, but
Yeah.
I wonder about everybody's been trying to make that connection, and I can see that it's even with a lot of intention, it's still really difficult to do.
Yeah, it is actually in their contract. And a lot of it is being done. It just at the time of the audit, it wasn't being documented and tracked and reported as far as the career learning equity goes. So for those of you new on the BAC, career learning equity essentially means that our consultants and contractors are required to provide a certain number of career learning opportunities for PPS students during the time of their contract. So that might be offering site visits to students while they're doing work. Like Kelly mentioned, one of our architectural consultants does an internship program every summer for PPS students. So it's things like that. We are developing the tracking of it, and it is required in their contracts. So and we're also developing ways of measuring the outcomes from those career learning opportunities and reporting on that in more complete and more effective ways, so that we understand if we are offering opportunities that are actually getting used by PPS students. The other thing that we have to do is work with as OSM, we have very little contact with actual students. So we have to work through the CTE program staff to connect the supply of that contractor-led career learning opportunities to the actual demand for it, which is the students. So we need to rely on departments and staff outside of OSM. And when the audit recommendation says that there lacks clear protocols and roles and responsibilities around that, that's what we take that to mean. And so that's something that we're working on, is assigning roles and responsibilities to the OSM folks and the CTE folks and the contractors, so that we're getting the opportunities connected to the students who would use the opportunities, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay, I think I'll turn it back over then. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
All right. I'm going to share my screen again. Thank you, Kelly. All right, our next agenda item is an update on our bond administration programs. This slide we share every time. This is about our business equity utilization data constraints. We get our data from B2G Now software, and it represents a point in time, and it may not be the same point in time that the Bond Accountability Committee report data is pulled from our eBuilder system. So there are some limitations on how we present the business equity utilization data that you'll see in the following slides. All right, this is our summary of our 2012 bond program. Our 2012 bond program is 99.9% spent. The scope is complete. We have about $480,000 remaining cash on hand from the 2012 bond to spend. And our goal is to get that spent and get 2012 closed out by June 30th of this year. Any questions on 2012? All right, 2017 program. You can see here, we'll go into more detail about Benson later in the Benson update, but the Lincoln High School replacement is, we're now projecting that to be about $18.5 million under budget. That money will return to the program in the contingency and be reallocated to other projects. That project is largely complete. The contracts still need to be closed out. And then we'll be able to sweep those funds back into our contingency category. Kellogg, McDaniel are complete. There's a little bit of funding still sitting in those projects that will get swept back into contingency very soon. I think we've got a couple of follow-up things that are happening with contractors at McDaniel that'll be finished very soon. And then athletics, our additional encumbered in athletics is $182,000. So we are pretty close to being complete on our athletics projects. We do still have, we do have a project with $2.5 million of funding to expand the grandstands at Roosevelt. That was something the board directed OSM to use bond funding for in the middle part of 2024. So that project is in process, just getting started. In our administration category, we are projecting our administration costs to be $3.3 million under budget when we are finally done with this 2017 program. Right now we have $22 million in contingency. Some of that will probably be used for cost overruns on Benson. And then in our unallocated health and safety category, for those of you new to the committee, in the original 2017 bond, the board wanted us to commit $150 million to health and safety projects across the district. So this unallocated just means that there is $26 million that we need to allocate to the next round of health and safety priority projects. And then unallocated athletics, there's still $100,000 left in there to allocate to athletics. Overall, we are 90% spent, and that includes both bond funds that you'll see here in the bond fund category. Whoops, it went forward. And other funds. So we have $895 million of 2017 bond funding, and other funding is grants and general fund and ETO incentives and the like. We've got $49.7 million of other funds in our 2017 bond program. Questions on 2017? Greg?
Yeah, yes. Can you tell us where we're at with the construction claims on the Benson project?
We have received notice of some claims and we're managing those through the contractual process. But it has just been a couple of days ago that we received notice. So it's going to be a process, a long process to review all those and to respond and to issue our own claims. We will also have claims to the contractor for the Benson project. So very, very early in the process there.
Do you have in the claims that were submitted from the contractor, do you have a total of what they're?
We do have a total.
It's quite large.
It's quite large.
Which is where you start out. I realize that. Okay.
I thought I saw somewhere that they were going to be paid a significant amount of money, and then if successful with some negotiations, there'd be a clawback, which is a little unusual.
Yes. So
I saw it in the material somewhere.
Yes, it is in the material, and we do have a more detailed Benson presentation coming up with the project manager for that. We did do an amendment with Anderson to conditionally pay some contested change orders. And so what that means is that towards the end of the construction, when we were really trying to get Benson open on time, which we successfully did do, there was a number of contested change orders, and to get the to keep the subcontractors working hard and moving towards this opening date, we came to an agreement with Anderson to conditionally pay. And it doesn't mean that we approved these change orders, but that we're paying them. And the documentation requirements for those change orders is subject to a postponement period. So they get 60 days after substantial completion to submit the documentation that goes along with those change orders. And we will review that documentation. And if it turns out that those change orders don't meet the contractual requirements and it's not reasonable to have paid them, then we will claw back the conditional payments. I will say that since that amendment, a number of those change orders have been reviewed and approved and are not, and have been actually paid. So the conditional payments have turned into actual payments, and those things are, some of it is no longer contested.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on 2017? All right. Moving to 2020. We will get more updates on Benson, Jefferson, Cleveland, and Wells later in the meeting, so I won't spend a lot of time on that. But our administration, right now, our contingency balance is $59,511,241. And our unallocated project funds, and this is project funds for unallocated categories of infrastructure projects. So this would be like ADA, mechanical, seismic. That total right now that is not allocated to projects is 17 million. So we do have a significant amount of contingency here if needed for, pardon me, for Benson claims. If we need that, we will have to make some decisions about whether we want to pay any Benson claims that we need additional funding for out of the 2017 program or the 2020 program. So we'll be strategic about that. And again, as noted earlier, still in this report, we have not spent any of the bond funding on the CBSE. And there is a large amount allocated to the Jefferson High School modernization. And that project has not started construction. It's still in design. So most of that funding has not yet been spent either. So the majority of the remaining bond funds from 2020 are allocated to projects, but we do have an amount here of around 77 million that needs to be allocated.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
This is more of a, I apologize to everyone. This is more of a first time member question. So
Sure.
maybe everyone else knows this, but just wondered if you could talk really briefly about the process for changing the budget over time, like for a particular school or for a particular bond funded purpose. That process, and I just wanted to verify that in the audit that we just heard about, the 5-year audit, that there are comparisons of where things landed, or where certain things have landed compared to the budget, were the final budget, not the original budget, I assume. Like if she said, I think she mentioned that one of the projects came in under budget. That's under the final budget, not under the original budget.
Kelly, maybe that's something that you can answer. I guess I can't answer that with 100% certainty.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Sure. I noted in your remarks on the audit that you mentioned a couple times, essentially that you verified that certain things came, or certain projects ended within budget, and I just was verifying that that was the sort of like final current or whatever the ending budget was, and not the original budget, because my more underlying question was what to Stormy was what is the process at PPS and within OSM to change budgets.
Yeah, so I think you're probably referring to Lincoln, and you're right, it's not compared to the original budget. That's accurate. And it does look like it's going to come in under budget, but not all closeout activities have been finished. Does that help?
Yep, thanks.
Yeah, so for the OSM part of that question, you'll see Jefferson here as a $311 million original budget. And then it says current budget, $366 million. So what you might be asking is, what was the process that made us arrive at the current budget? Well,
I guess like come up with the number and also approve the number, I guess.
Okay.
Two parts.
Yeah, so it could depend on the project and kind of the milestones that are reported to the board. For the Jefferson project in particular, this $366 million current budget is from the comprehensive plan. So the original budget would have been created during the bond planning process for 2020. And then during the comprehensive plan, the design team comes up with a conceptual plan and a set of narratives that describe what the project will look like and area program. And that's all submitted to a professional cost estimator. And so the professional cost estimator will then, produce a cost estimate, and that will be included in the comprehensive plan that's presented to the board. So when the team presented the comprehensive plan, that included the design scope, schedule, and the budget of $366 million. And the Board of Education passed a resolution approving that comprehensive plan and directing OSM to continue on the project under those parameters.
Got it.
And Travis, at the time we did the 311 million, we knew it was low. And that's why we made the contingency larger to cover that at the time, because we didn't know that when they went out for the bond measure. There's kind of a sense of that one.
Yeah, thanks. So the original budgets are basically like early cost estimates based on the like planning estimates, and then the design estimates are sort of the final or current budget.
Yep. And so after the comprehensive plan phase, as the projects move through their design phases, schematic design, design development, they get new estimates. So if those estimates if they are over the current budget and they can't be, there's no path to budget through value engineering efforts or, finding efficiencies or doing something more effectively, then we would go back to the board. Usually it used to be called the Facilities and Operations Committee, but now it's called the School Facilities Improvement Oversight Committee. We would go back to them, update them on the new cost estimates, and get approval to, or get their feedback on changing the budget to match the new cost estimate.
Okay.
I will say just briefly, a lot of these projects during this period of time particularly were impacted severely with COVID-related escalations, and then there was lack of capacity in the market too. So I remember as these budgets were being revised, particularly I think for Benson, a big part of that was steel and just general escalation, inflation, supply chain issues and whatnot. So hopefully some of that's behind us. We'll see.
Yeah, that's something that I've seen in my job and my last job. I mean, pretty, I think it affected construction of all types. And honestly, just for the record, I wasn't really trying to like poke at the budget increases or anything. I really just was curious about what the process was, and something I pay attention to a lot in my own organization here is that when you're constantly, we have a little bit of a problem of revising budgets up as we get more information, and but then we tend to only compare to the final budget. And so I think here, that generally makes sense if it's not a overly iterative process where you're constantly increasing it. But yeah. So thank you. Just wanted to understand that.
Yeah, and you'll notice over here the estimate at completion for Jefferson is at 491 million. And so that's because after the comprehensive plan, the board directed OSM to go back and reimagine the Jefferson project and change some significant things that were planned in the comprehensive plan. One of the most significant being that the comprehensive plan had a requirement for students to swing offsite, which means to attend school at a different campus. So it would be the Marshall campus the board asked OSM to reimagine the project with students remaining on site during the construction of the modernized Jefferson and not swing off site. And so after that reimagining, the new cost estimate was at 491 million. And so we have not yet updated, and I think we talked about this at the last BAC meeting. We were kind of like, well, is the budget really 366 million if the current project plan costs 490 million? And so we talked about possibly updating that budget. However, since the last BAC meeting, and we'll get into this when we get into the modernization projects a little deeper, the superintendent and the board have asked us to pause on the design of all three modernization projects and study some cost reduction strategies for those. So the budgets are, for all three projects, Jefferson included, are under review. So it didn't seem appropriate to change the budget for Jefferson to 490 million. At this point, it makes more sense after that cost study and some decisions are made by the board about the updated budgets for those projects.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah.
I did have just a question on the table, just so I understand what I'm seeing. The infrastructure projects that had no initial budget and then a large eventual budget, and then the 2017 bond balance being a budget item. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how that's a budget item and then having it go to zero. Just the logistics of this table.
The 2017 bond balance, I'm gonna have to look back at the calculations. I inherited these reports from the last senior director. And I think that related to the Benson, the funding that we needed in the 2020 program to complete 2017.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. It was like unfunded 2017 scope and project.
Yes. So you can see that the Benson original budget here is
got it.
Yeah. So I think that was kind of what the original budget was in the 2020 bond to be allocated to Benson was supposed to be.
That makes sense. And then the infrastructure project, I know this is fairly similar to the unallocated project funds. I just wondered why it wasn't identified as infrastructure projects originally. But
yeah, that's a good question. I think that it is because all of that original budget is accounted for here in the unallocated project funds. So what this is, this infrastructure projects it's kind of a spend up. So we started with 241 million and we have allocated already $261 million, and we have left 17. I think we've put more contingency money into infrastructure projects than we originally budgeted, but this was the intention, was $241 million of 2020 bond funds would go to these infrastructure projects.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Other questions on 2020? I did want to point out, since the last time we met, the 2025 bond that the board just referred in January for the May election was originally intended and planned to be in the November 2024 election. So when that bond referral was delayed, it created a gap in funding for the curriculum program and the technology program. And to close that gap in funding, we allocated money from the 2020 contingency. So that was $9.9 million was allocated from 2020 contingency to the curriculum program, and $7.9 million was allocated from contingency to the technology program. And that for the technology program, it was largely to cover gap in funding for the ERP replacement program project. All right. This is our overall. So this combines, this totals up all of our bond funds and other funds for all three programs. Any questions on the administration?
I just have one question, Stormy. Any idea how long the hold on the modernization projects for 2020 is going to last, since that does impact schedule and that's something that the BAC has to report on?
It does impact schedule. We don't know yet because we are just in the process now of assessing the cost saving strategies. So what kinds of what magnitude of strategy corresponds to what magnitude of cost savings, and then what does that, accepting that magnitude of changes, what does that do to the schedule? So we're in the process of creating a report for that right now, and we'll be talking to the superintendent about it soon. And then the next step is to present those things to the board and get some board decisions around it. It's so, the direction to pause and do this cost study is relatively new. We just started it in December. And so we don't have the timeline for the decision making yet. But once we have that, which should be soon, then we'll be able to, we know what the next steps are after that. Is, you know, depending on the magnitude of decisions that changes to the comprehensive plan that the superintendent and the board are willing to consider, that's going to make the schedule delay more or less. So if they are willing to consider a bigger magnitude of changes to these projects in order to achieve cost savings, that means we're going farther back in the design process, which is going to cause, of course, a larger delay than if they're willing to consider smaller changes to achieve smaller cost savings, I guess.
Great, thank you.
Norm?
Yeah, so when you say the cost reduction studies, that I assume is being done led by the architectural teams?
Yes, so we had the architectural teams pause on their designs, so they're not progressing on the current designs. Instead, what we have done is all three design teams, and we've got Bora Architecture is actually leading two of the projects. Wells and Jefferson are Bora projects, and then Malum has Cleveland. We've directed them all to study kind of these bundles of cost saving strategies that kind of fall into a couple of buckets. One is reducing square footage. So one way to reduce costs significantly, and these cost saving strategies they're beyond just value engineering or kind of finding efficiencies in the floor plan. So these are possible reductions in square footage, and then they're reductions in kind of standards. So like design standards, ed spec standards, and things like that. So none of this has been decided. This is OSM saying, if you want to reduce the costs of these schools, these are some possible strategies that you might want us to explore further. Which of these kinds of strategies are you willing to pursue and interested in pursuing? And then we'll go get more information, more design around those strategies. But we don't have that feedback yet. We don't know what the outcome of that decision-making process with the superintendent and the board will be.
A couple of follow-ons to that. So on those project teams, do those include CMGC on some of them or cost consultants?
They do, yes.
Typically?
Yes, all three include cost consultants. The cost consultants have not been so far the project, the cost reduction studies have not included as much input or detail as the cost estimates for the schematic design, for example. We've gotten some kind of input from them, and then the projects also do include CMGCs. So I'm like giving you a lot of spoilers for the future modernization presentations coming up, but Jefferson has a CMGC on board, and so our SD cost estimates, all of our projects had gotten through the schematic design phase of their design, and they all had a schematic design cost estimate. And what the schematic design cost estimate is it's the CMGC doing their cost estimate, and it's a professional cost estimator doing their cost estimate. Those two things are combined together and reconciled to come up with the schematic design cost estimate. And so for Jefferson, we do have that CMGC on board. For Cleveland and Wells, we have completed the procurement of the CMGC. The contracts are awaiting board approval. So what we were able to do for the cost study and to get those CMGC partners involved in cost estimating right now is to execute a related services agreement contract with them. For a small amount, these are $100,000 or less contracts so that they can give us input on these cost savings and help with SD cost estimating in general.
Then now or later, when appropriate, could you tell us about the Cornerstone Construction Management report that was mentioned in the Oregonian article? I imagine that's a whole separate thing from the cost reduction on the projects.
It is, yes, it is. So what the cost, the Cornerstone report is kind of comparing some different projects in the region, including ours and another school district's projects, and trying to identify areas that PPS might explore further to see if there are cost savings that are available to us between those projects. We do have a draft of that report, but it's the report is going directly to the superintendent, and it is the superintendent's to share with the board, and it has not been shared with the board yet. And it's also not in a final form. So I wouldn't expect that report to tell us that there is any one kind of smoking gun that makes our projects more expensive than other projects in the region or in the country. I think it's going to be a combination of, you know, here's a difference, here's a difference, here's a difference. Maybe a possible way to reduce the cost of PPS's projects are to look at, you know, you should look more into this factor, you should look more into this factor, you should look more into this factor. I don't think it's going to be one factor that they point to that is the clear cause of cost differences between projects.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So Stormy, Norm kind of mentioned it. I don't think we've ever seen the education specs for these schools. At least I don't ever recall seeing. The only one I ever know about is you got to design it for 1,700 students.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm wondering if it wouldn't be, you know, because certainly as we go through these in the future, and we're going to have to opine on whether or not we think these budgets, or at least that's part of our charge. I'd like to know what the specs are that we are designing them to, if possible, if it's written out somewhere.
It is written out somewhere. It is, it's on the web. So if you are, if you're in Google and you search for Portland Public Schools educational specifications, you'll be able to find it. We can also send out an email to the committee that includes a link to it.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Then we'd all have it. It'd be part of our record, kind of that we've gotten it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do that. So that's one of the big inputs into a comprehensive plan. The other couple of inputs are our design standards, which aren't educational specifications, but they're more like facility standards around, you know, what kinds of pipes do we use, what kinds of air handlers, what kinds of fire suppression systems, things like that. So there's a set of standards that's different from educational standards. And then also complying with our goals and policies. So we have a climate policy that informs our designs, and that climate policy includes all electric designs, so that we won't, it commits to not installing any new fossil fuel burning appliances in PPS schools going forward, among other things. So there are some energy use intensity EUI goals included in there that affect the designs and therefore affect the costs. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Stormy. I have a clarifying question about the bundles of cost saving strategies you mentioned earlier, and I'm happy to take my answer later in the agenda if it's coming. You know, you don't have to tease it. You mentioned, you know, 2 bundles, reducing square footage and reducing standards. I assume that there will also be an analysis on doing both of those things, reducing square footage and standards, that they're not mutually exclusive.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, and we're not going to be presenting the cost savings study here today. We haven't completed the study or presented it to the superintendent yet, or the board. So just again, to spoiler alert on our modernization updates in a little bit, they will be mentioning the pause and the cost savings study, but we don't have the outcomes of the study available yet to report. All right, looks like we're ready to move on to our modernization project updates. Our first one is Benson. And Armin, do you prefer to share your own screen, or would you like me to let me know when to move to the next slide?
If you don't mind, I'd like you to keep it there. My internet's a little unstable sometimes.
Sure thing.
Hi, everybody. My name is Armin Milazzo. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the Benson Modernization Project, also for the MPG Multiple Pathways to Graduation Project. We'll be presenting those both tonight. Also in the chat, I put in a link to both our ed specs and to our facility standards that you could quickly click on to get to, just for your information. Okay, I'm also a PPS parent of 2 graduates from Lincoln High School as well myself. So yes, Kara, I got you there. It's good to see all the new faces and faces from before. Happy 2025. I'm going to jump right into it. I know we're a little bit over our scheduled time, so I'll try to be as fast as possible. Typically, we go through the colored section up top. As Stormy was mentioning and we've discussed, our budget is impacted. We can get further into the details of that as we get through the presentation. Our equity is in the yellow. We're still waiting for some of the reporting from the 91 subcontractors that were on that project. Our schedule is also impacted. You'll see in the next slide a little bit more data on that. Overall, we have been impacted as a project on a whole. Are there any questions on this slide before we move forward? Okay, Stormy, if you would, please. Thank you. So those who have been here before have seen this slide. It looks familiar. The big now red line is where we are today. As Stormy mentioned, we were able to open on time. We had limited use of some of the school functions. Some of the systems weren't fully functional. Some of the equipment wasn't fully functional, but not a lot of people know how the sausage was made. So it was still a great opening. As you'll see in the next slide and the following slides, some really amazing photographs of the project currently. Right now at Benson, we have some punch list items, some non-conforming work that we're still working through. The most recent schedule that we have from the contractor is that they will be done in about 4 to 5 months. We also had a flood, unfortunately, of the main gym. Those repairs are ongoing. That is really one of the main features of the schedule impact right now. I do anticipate that there might be some work in the summertime. It's really hard to work around students that are in an active school, and especially at Benson, because we have night scholar school. We have a lot of other programs. So working around them is not as efficient as we would like. The Multiple Pathways to Graduation building, which is located on the bottom of the screen here, that building actually obtained substantial completion on November 21st. So they're doing really well. Their final closeout is probably a few weeks to maybe 2 months away to pick up some of the punch list items that they're working on. But that building is in much better shape as far as completion and project closeout. Any questions here before we move on? All right. Stormy, if you would, please. Thank you. Okay, this is Benson. These are actual photographs. These are not renderings. The school looks amazing. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to get out there. This is an amazing 385,000 square foot facility. Top photograph is our main entrance. This is our historic building. It's been there well over 100 years, started in 1916. The bottom left is our new renovated lobby. That lobby is over 100 years old. All of the wood that you see there is the historic wood. In the background, there are some new doors that were added to create a secure vestibule that leads to the office, which is on the bottom right. That is our new office. Little hard to see, but in the far right-hand side of that blue box, yes, right there. Thank you, Stormy. That's actually the safe door from the original safe of the building that used to house all of your permanent records. Yes, they did have permanent records. So it was kind of cool. There's a lot of Easter eggs that we have on site of old products, historic things that came back. And we actually made use of a lot of products from the school. So when we tore down parts of the school, some of that old historic lumber, large growth lumber, was actually made into benches and other things that the students did. Stormy, if you could, on the next slide. This is an amazing space. This is our new commons area. It houses our cafeteria, our student store. Up in the top right above the student store, there's the historic World War II drone airplane. It's one of the drone airplanes that did not get shot down. That's actually there. You can see also in the background the stairs. One of the most significant features here is the big glass wall that you see behind that glass wall is actually a large courtyard. It's fully enclosed on 4 sides. And it encompasses both the historic building and the new buildings. It's a really great space. Really nice to see the students use these spaces the way they were intended. Next slide, please. Here's another view. On the very bottom, you'll see that the stairs, we call them the learning stairs, they actually took the historic Benson gym floor, cut it up, and placed it on the top of these stairs as a seating surface. But the way they did that, you actually get to see the center emblem from the original gym floor. It's pretty amazing. Next slide. Here we have the media center, the library. Another great space. Next slide. This is the historic theater. We put the theater back true to the original design colors. We added a lot more modernized features in here. You can see the all of the lights up above. Those actually are on chains that are mechanically connected to motors that actually drop down, so students and staff can change them out without having the need to go up onto any scaffolding or lifts, and then they get raised back up. Next slide. This is another great view of the theater. I can't tell you how.
Just listening.
Okay, sorry. Next slide, please. These are some of the CTE learning spaces. On the top left, you'll see the dental lab. We have the dental chairs and some x-ray machinery. These are all fully functional, operational, better than my dentist office. On the top right, you'll see that we have our nursing stations. These are full beds with fake medical gas walls. There isn't medical gas, but all the students will be able to see it, use it. They actually come in scrubs into school, which is really, really awesome to see these students coming in scrubs. On the bottom left, you'll see some of our construction shop areas. In the background, that plywood looking, that is actually one of the tiny homes that the students are building. There's actually 2 currently being built right now. And on the bottom right, you'll see there that they're actually using one of the CNC machines to route out some of the skateboards that they create as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. These are some of our learning spaces. Typical classroom on the top right. On the top left. On the top right, this is one of our hallways. You can see that big long bench. That is actually a beam from one of the historic buildings that was, I don't like to use the word demolished, but it was decommissioned. And all of the scrap wood was either used or was processed so that we could get our LEED certification in the proper waste bins and recycling as needed. On the bottom left is another smaller learning stair. This is closer to the auto shop. And on the bottom right are some of our restrooms. We have both gendered and all gender restrooms. This particular one is an all gender restroom where students can use the stalls, and then they have a shared sink in the middle. Next slide, please. Auto shop. Our auto shop is huge. It has 14 bays. This is just a small snapshot of it. You can see they have engines and cars, and some days it looks like a chop shop. It's pretty cool to see all the stuff that goes on over there. Next slide, please. This is our historic gym. So this gym has the running track. I believe this is the last running track and PPS has. We did salvage it. This building was fully retrofitted and includes a Type 3 seismic upgrade. Next slide. This is the main gym. This is actually open right now, even though we had the water damage. We were able to expedite the gym itself to get refinished. The lower level locker rooms, weight room, and wrestling room, those are still impacted. Those are still under construction. So we're able to at least get students in to use the gym. They're using it for games. There's projector screens in here. There will be batting cages going up very soon as well. Next slide. This is an aerial view, and all of those blue arrows are solar panels. We have a lot of solar panels, including Brio Soleils, which are awnings in front of windows that help reduce the heat gain into the school. Not only are they doing that, they're also doing dual purpose by harnessing the energy of the sun as solar panels. So we have a lot of solar panels on this project. Next slide, please. This is our Buckman Field entrance. This is a revised new entrance with ADA access from the school down to Buckman Field. We also see there the historic tower. It's a fully functional AM radio tower. Benson has been using the AM tower since, I believe it was 1923. It's one of the oldest in Portland, still in use. Next slide, please. All right, I tried to keep it quick. Any questions? Greg?
Yeah, I was curious on the solar panels. Do they generate enough electricity to run the school, or are they just augment it, or are they, I mean,
yeah, so
what's their
right now
purpose?
yeah, good question, Greg. Their purpose is to put power back into the grid. So we actually have a reverse meter. So what we're doing is we're harnessing the energy, we're converting it into electricity, we're putting it back into the grid. It actually doesn't flow through the school, and it is not enough to run the school at this time.
Okay.
The school's a big use of energy, especially this one being so CTE heavy and being 385,000 square feet.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions? Y'all gonna let me off easy tonight?
I mean, there's been many times that we haven't, Armand, so I feel like you earned it.
It's okay. It's okay. All right. Well, I know there's a lot of other people anxious to do their presentations. So if you have no other questions, I'm going to cut my video off and say thank you all very much. And I hope you all have a great 2025 and look forward to seeing you all at the next BAC meeting.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Armand. All right. Oh, we forgot MPG. Oh, no.
I'm back. Hi, welcome. It's me again. So this is multiple pathways to graduation. Again, this is not a rendering. This is an actual photograph of the final school product. This is our main entrance. This is Kitty Corner right next to Benson. Anderson Construction also built this one as well. Next slide, please. This is a nice aerial view. Up on the top in the center, you'll see that there is a courtyard. Unfortunately, this photograph does not show the final product, but there is a courtyard out there with pavers and some plantings, so students can utilize that space. You'll also notice a lot of solar panels, and I just realized I forgot to put my blue arrows on all the solar panels. Next slide, please. This is our main entrance to the school. One of the concepts, the key concept for the design that the students had was to have a treehouse concept. They wanted it to resemble a treehouse. So you'll see a lot of wood elements. This is also a mass timber product. So you'll see the mass timber exposed. We did metal deck and concrete over the mass timber. And that was a value engineering change. Because somewhere in the 2020, we had this thing called a pandemic and price of lumber went up. I think it was over 200% at some time and then came back down. Next slide, please. This is our childcare area, beautiful area. Students get to bring their children here so that they can have some peace. For those who have children, understand that while they're actually in a learning environment in the rest of the school. Next slide, please. So our gymnasium is on the bottom right. Our top left is our cafeteria. And then we have our central stair that bring people from the first floor right outside the lobby directly up to the cafeteria. Next slide, please. This is one of our learning centers. There are two in the project. There's a library, and then there's this other space here in the Dart Learning area. Next slide, please. Here's our library. On the top left is our library. There's some other learning spaces, some breakout spaces. These are, again, on the top right, all gender restrooms. Same concept. Everybody can use a stall, and they have shared sinks right outside the stalls. Next slide, please. Okay. Any questions on MPG? Okay, I'm really going to cut out this time. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Armin. All right, Jefferson is next up. Steve, do you want to share your screen, or would you like to continue the way we have been with Armin?
You can continue. That's fine. Thank you.
Sounds great.
Hello, everyone. Steve Efros, Senior Project Manager on the Jefferson Project. And also following the trend, I'm the parent of a PPS middle and high school student. So yeah, starting with the BAC report, starting with the budget for the current project. You can see the original budget of $366 million and an estimate of completion of $491 million. And there's currently about 19 million actuals to date. So with the current estimate overfunding, that's leading to budget impacts, which you can see. Under equity, you can see the overall totals are coming in at just under 11% based on consultant payments to certified businesses. And then construction trade payments have not yet been made, but those will contribute toward meeting the 18 or exceeding the 18% goal. Regarding schedule, while we were on schedule at the end of 2024, I'll be sharing an update on the pause of the project design that occurred in December, which causes schedule impacts. So before I move on to the presentation, I just want to see if there's any questions about this report. Yes, Chris.
Yeah, hi. I just was wondering about the scale for when impacts are or these rows for budget, equity, schedule, et cetera, are categorized as caution versus impacts. Specifically, I guess my perception is that the budget is driving the need to go back and reevaluate design. So I would have considered that to be in like the red impact category. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes, there you
go. And, you know, maybe I'll have a look at this later. I think this is a good orientation thing for me to understand as I onboard to the committee. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, if there are no other questions about the report, we can move on to the presentation. Thank you. So the following are updates since we last presented to the BAC in July of 2024. So starting with coordination with the city, the Jefferson project team, including the Bora Lever design team, has been working very closely and successfully with the city this past summer and fall, moving forward with the design, including meeting with the Historic Landmarks Commission to find ways of bringing the character and inspiration of the original 1909 building to the new building. The team has also been meeting on a regular basis with the city as part of the major projects group to review more complex code issues during early design so that solutions can be developed in collaboration ahead of the eventual permitting process. Next, in terms of community engagement, as you might remember from our meeting last year, the Jefferson project shifted from the traditional design advisory group approach to regular community design workshops, which continued last summer and fall, and included project updates, cultural placemaking exercises, and opportunities for community members to provide input on the design. And the community engagement also allowed the project team to request specific feedback from the community members on how to bring the character and inspiration of the original 1909 building to the new building, which we were then able to present to the Historic Landmarks Commission. And then finally, in terms of just general project teamwork, overall throughout the summer and fall, the bulk of the Jefferson project team's efforts have been focused on multiple weekly functional team meetings with members of the Bora Lever technical and engineering team and the Anderson Contractor and Trade Partner Group to collaborate on a host of topics, all leading to issuance and approval of the 100% schematic design documents in the fall. The project team most recently reached a milestone issuance of the 50% design development documents prior to the high school modernization project design being paused. So I guess before kind of shifting to that pause, I just want to see if there's any questions about kind of that work to date. Okay, if not, if you could go to the next slide. So just in terms of the work from December through the present and the cost reduction process that Stormy described. So really beginning in early December, at the direction of the superintendent, the high school modernization project teams were directed to pause the current design and prepare new concept designs, schedules, and budget within target budgets that meet the academic, social, and extracurricular needs of students. So the OSM team worked with the Bora Lever and Anderson teams to develop a cost reduction study in 2 phases. The teams completed phase 1, including a narrative, diagrams, cost reduction calculator, area program summary, and design construction schedule at the end of 2024. And then the OSM team, as Stormy has described, has been taking all of that data in those cost reduction scenarios and preparing a report to present to district leadership. And then finally, as I shared in the BAC report and as we've talked about regarding project risk, while there were specific risks associated with the current design, moving forward, any delay in bringing forward cost reduction scenarios that meet the board, superintendent, and community requirements will increase the risk of project delay and escalating costs. So any questions? I know we've talked a little bit about the cost reduction process, and this is kind of just an overview of it. Okay, and I think the other project teams will kind of get into it as well, talking about from their project perspectives. So in that case, if you go to the next slide. So this is just kind of a recap of the design work that had occurred through 100% schematic design. This is an overview of the site plan from the 100% set, where you can see the new school on the north end of the site on Killingsworth, a new cross-block pedestrian connection just south of the building, and new athletic fields on the site and across Alberta. And you can see how the very constrained Jefferson site required maximum efficiency across the site in order to fit all the program elements. If you go to the next slide.
Before you leave that
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Sorry. I assume you didn't look at trying to get Alberta Street vacated so that you could, since you've got everything on both sides, right? So that you would have the entire area without a street running through it.
There have been conversations with PBOT about Alberta in general, just because of safety concerns for students crossing. Right. I don't know the exact designation, but I think Alberta, from their perspective, is considered kind of a major corridor for them.
Okay. All right. So yeah, it doesn't look like it on the drawing. So I thought it was just a neighborhood
it's very
street.
common.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You're right.
Yeah. I think also there's sort of the added feature, which actually does bring some benefit, of the cross-block connection, which kind of does add, both the pedestrian connection, but also kind of during the school day, kind of a safe connection across the site, because it's essentially a super block that the Jefferson School sits on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. So these are just a couple of renderings of the school as it was in the current design. So this view is of the main entry on Kirby, and you can see the cross-block connection in the foreground. And this rendering was actually part of our design advice request presentation to the Historic Landmarks Committee or Commission. And you can see how the new building was trying to bring some of the character and inspiration of the original 1909 brick building forward. And then if you go to the next slide, it's the last slide. And this is a view of the corner of Killingsworth and Kirby. And it shows how the new building frontage on Killingsworth is highlighting the importance of activating this important neighborhood street. And while the main entry to the building is on Kirby, you can see how the project team was really working to bring as much program activity as possible to this frontage. So again, just a highlight from where we were at that point late last year. Any overall questions? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah.
All right, Ida B. Wells is up next. So Donna, would you like me to flip slides or would you prefer to share your screen? Uh-oh.
Oh, there. I couldn't unmute. Thank you.
Yep.
You could keep showing the screen, please, for me. I don't have any internet where I'm at, unfortunately, unexpectedly. So I'm going to do this on my phone.
Okay, go ahead.
Glad to see all these new members. Very exciting. I forgot so many new members were going to be here. So welcome. We have been progressing along on schedule and on budget until recently with the cost reduction study that Steve explained. That is why you'll see the schedule is impacted currently and is in a very high impact situation right now for the schedule. I think you can go ahead and move forward there. We've finished schematic design. Bora was moving ahead into design development phase. We were doing lots of different meetings with various stakeholders, including parents and teachers, regular meetings with the school principal and manager. The design advisory committee was meeting very regularly, and we had a great turnout for that. At the time of the pause that occurred at the beginning of December, RLB and Hoffman provided cost estimates for us on the 100% schematic design documents. We were basically right in the middle of a VE exercise at the time of the pause, but we did reconcile those estimates to within 1.5%, and we obtained a very doable path to budget. Our original budget was $455 million as our total project cost, as approved by the board last May. We've similar to the other projects, we've been meeting with the city and are part of the major projects group permitting process as well. Our community engagement has not only included things like our design advisory committee, but we've also been trying to include students. And Bora had a great idea to start a design club. So for the past semester since school started this fall, we've had a design club for students, and they bring pizza, which really helps get the kids there. We've had approximately 40 students coming every other week on Tuesdays, and it's been a great chance for us to gather their opinions. And then we also kind of sneak in a little bit of education for them as well. We've done, I guess we pretty much talked about a lot of that already. And yeah, like I said, we were just in the middle of the VE concepts, and we did come up with a path to budget, but we are considering all of that informal. Go ahead, Stormy. Thank you. And then this is basically what Steve just talked about, the cost reduction process. I won't reread all of that. All three teams did do the same steps and provided the same information with all of our consultants. So we are all in the same phase at this point of the cost reduction process. And unfortunately, I got rid of a lot of pretty pictures, forgetting that so many new people would be here. But this is the proposed site design from the comprehensive plan. This was the direction that we are headed at this point in time, unless anything changes. In this plan, we do move pretty much everything on this site. Currently, the track and field is along the north edge of the site running east-west, and we do move that to a north-south orientation, which is preferred. The pool is there and is owned by the city, and Parks runs that in the summer. That will remain, and we have been planning around that pool. Currently, Ida B. Wells is connected to the pool deck, and people use those locker rooms in the school. So the way this plan shows, we would have a pool support building that we are placing right there. Thank you for pointing that out. In order to work with Parks and provide what we have agreed for many years to provide. And the students would be in the existing building during construction. This new building would be built in the middle of the site there. After the students move into the new building, we would be demolishing the old building. And then as part of phase 2, we would be building that baseball field there on the right and a multi-use field on the right, and finishing up the new parking also there on the right. Looking back to how we got here, we have been starting to look at some other options. One of the options we looked at with all of our outreach was a plan where we had tried to leave the track and field in its existing place and put a somewhat compact building there, still in that same site in the center of this. In the center of the site, we put the building that really has become the best location for the building, considering that we would prefer to keep students in the existing building on the east side of the site while we're building a new building, and then demolish the old building. So it's really the best site there in the middle on the what is right now a multi-use field. I think
Donna, was this one of the site layout options that was considered during the comprehensive planning phase?
Yes, right. So we have started to look back at that, but that's where this comes from. Just a kind of how did we get here? We did consider this at one point, and we may go back to that depending on what happens with the cost reduction studies. So right now, as you know, we're in the middle of this cost reduction study. So our design that you looked at before is on hold, and we are waiting for that CMGC contract to be approved by the board.
A question. You would go ahead with the CMGC contract even though the bond measure hasn't passed yet?
Yes, we had 20 million from the last bond for this design. So that would be part of the design, the pre-construction piece of it. It's pre-construction contract.
But they would then get the construction contract if the bond measure passed, is that right?
Correct.
And if it doesn't, their contract ends, obviously.
Correct.
And it says that. Oh, okay.
Yes, the sort of structure of the CMGC contracts is that the initial contract sum is for the pre-construction services, and then the actual construction part of it is an amendment, a GMP amendment, guaranteed maximum price, onto that CMGC contract. So we would not execute a GMP amendment in the case of a next bond that isn't passed.
And you don't owe them any money if it isn't passed either, right? Other than what's been agreed to in the pre.
Yes,
design.
other than what they've performed as pre-construction services.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Do you have to go back to the board for approval for a GMP?
We do not. So when we go to the board for the initial approval, we ask them for approval of the initial amount of the pre-construction services, but then we share with them the anticipated maximum for the contract. And so in the case of the GMP amendment, we don't typically go back to them to get approval for the GMP amendment execution because we don't do.
I mean, would you if it was substantially higher than?
Yes, yes, we have rules that that do require us to go back to the board for approval if amendments or change orders are going to exceed a certain percentage of the contract value, then we do have to go back to the board for approval on those types of amendments and change orders.
Thanks.
Can I ask you a rookie question here? For the cost reduction studies, how do you define the targets for those studies? Is it a range that you're aiming for, or are options are weighed?
Yeah, the superintendent shared with us target budgets that she wanted us to use in the cost estimate and the cost reduction studies. And so that's we are generating at least one bundle of cost saving strategies that we think would achieve that that target budget. And you know, she shared those in a board meeting, and those were, I want to say 360 million for Cleveland and Wells and 370 million for Jefferson. But if any of the PMs need to, please correct those numbers. Any other questions before we move to the next one? All right.
Thank you.
Okay, Eric, you're up, and I think you wanted to share your own screen. Is that right? Oh, you're on mute, Eric.
There we go, double muted. Yes, that would be great because I've got some updated images from the architect.
Great.
So let's get that. Okay. Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Eric Girding, Senior Project Manager on the Cleveland High School project. And now I can't tell, but can everyone see that the screen that's got the graph on there? And again, also want to welcome the new members to the BAC, and hello to members that have met before in previous meetings. It's great to see new folks involved, and happy to be here to talk about Cleveland. I guess following the introduction trends tonight, we've got 4 kids in our family. 3 are PPS graduates. 1 is a junior at Franklin, so the 4th one is about 18 months away. And I myself am a Cleveland High School graduate, so it's been a lot of fun to get to work on the Cleveland High School project and kind of get in touch with our alumni community and be back in the building and so forth. And prior to that, I was the senior project manager on the Lincoln High School project on the 2017 bond, and the Fabian K-8 project on the 2012 bond. So looking at Cleveland here, at our kind of status at a glance, right now showing kind of the yellow caution in these categories. And just to note on the equity reporting, that some of that reporting lags in coming into the system, but just want to know that with our A&E team, we have a primary partner with Malum Architects, which is Studio Petretti, which is a women business enterprise. And so just anecdotally, I could say we're somewhere around 20 to 25% right now spent for certified firms. So doing really well in the equity category, but we can't officially record that in this document, but the next meeting will have that information. I'm showing the yellow caution with schedule right now, even though we are kind of in a pause, as you've heard, regarding our cost reduction study. That the caution really kind of depends. It could go into the impacts of red, maybe at our next meeting. Looking at the criteria for those colors, it's really related to substantial completion when we have, when we are looking at our overall schedule performance on the project. And right now, we have the caution because depending on the level of budget reductions we have, if we have budget reductions that still maintain our base ed spec qualifications or requirements, we can still maintain the current schedule we have. At the same time, we're not sure because there may be changes to that depending on the level of reductions. As we've heard, we're all creating these studies to do that and to look at that. We're waiting to get further direction from the superintendent. And so that's why we're in the yellow right now as far as caution, but just want to, that's kind of with an asterisk about that. Otherwise, I think I'll just move on to the next slide unless there's a question about this information. Great. All right, so our progress since our last BAC meeting. Well, we've done quite a lot of work. Lucky to say we are, Cleveland Project is also working with the city in the major projects group. So we were really lucky to have the city kind of help us out on these 3 big high school modernization projects and to bring us into that major projects group process, which allows us to meet with all the bureaus every 2 weeks, that we have an assigned reviewer, and we work through code and design issues and identify any modifications that we'll be seeking in our applications. And it's been a really good process to kind of vet the design with the city review team, prior to submitting our drawings and submittals. So that process has been going great. Obviously, we've continued our community engagement through this whole time with our design advisory group, community design workshops, our internal stakeholders working, with staff and the administration at Cleveland working on the schematic design. And we also went through our CMGC procurement. As Donna was mentioning before, we want to get our CMGCs on during the design phase so that we have that pre-construction services that is kind of the third member of our team here to really, give us that estimating and constructability review through the design process. So they're a really valuable team member during design. That contract was also, procured in August and submitted for approval right at the beginning of November. It just has not been approved by the board yet. So just highlighting that is kind of a risk for us if we don't get approval of our CMGC contract in the really near future. If we're being directed to kind of go full steam ahead on the design, we won't have that third member of our team as far as with the architect, contractor, and owner to dive deep into that design. So we are just highlighting that as a risk and hoping we get approval soon. We completed a 75% schematic design milestone. That was the documents that we used to create our schematic design estimate. So we had our CMGC estimate and our third-party estimator that's part of our A&E team create detailed estimates. We went through the reconciliation process of those estimates, and then also had a week-long facilitated VE workshop where we bring in a VE professional facilitator that worked with the whole team over a 5-day, kind of all hands on deck. That's all we did that week. This is kind of a standard thing we've done on our major projects over the years. And so this is where we identified opportunities for savings. And then, of course, our estimates highlighted some of the challenges that we have with the project and creating a pathway to budget. One of the things that Skanska had identified is just the difficulties with the site of Cleveland being on a tight sort of urban site where the logistics and constructability is very complicated, complex. It's just like working downtown. Additionally, the schedule that was contemplated during the early conceptual planning phase, which was the pre-bond planning, the pre-2020 bond planning, it contemplated a 2-year construction duration. Because previously we had done a 2-year construction duration at Franklin, and the students went to the Marshall campus for 2 years. We also did the same thing at Grant, and then again at McDaniel.
The main difference that we have at Cleveland is that we don't have the acres and acres of logistics and laydown area that those other three campuses have that really kind of help support the construction team during that 2 years. Additionally, with replacing the historic building at Cleveland, there's quite a lot of demolition and really tight space to work. Also, during our due diligence, we've, in our geotechnical investigation, we've identified really poor soils conditions at the Cleveland site. It's close enough to the Willamette River. It doesn't seem like it is, but it's close enough to be part of kind of a big sort of floodplain area that historically the soil condition is subject to liquefaction in a major earthquake event. So we have to install significant ground improvements before we can even start foundations. So we're looking at about 1,600 geopiers just in the ground to build up the strength of the ground before we can even start the building. So a few of those elements combined really made that 2-year construction schedule not impossible to do according to Skanska, but we required a lot of overtime and really kind of a loss of productivity because of the tight site and having to kind of move around in different quadrants and overlapping different trades at the same time, where we're demoing one area, we're putting geopiers in another area and still abating another area. And they identified a significant cost increase just related to overtime. And so working out within this BE workshop and wanting to look at, okay, what's our pathway to budget? Part of that pathway to budget includes a 9-month schedule extension of the construction duration in order to alleviate that overtime. I mean, we were looking at about a $50 million magnitude of this overtime and logistics complications and complexity. And we were able to eliminate that with just an extension of the duration. Other than that, we still had other changes to make with VE, where we made efficiencies and you know, kind of got the design into a really good place, where we really felt like we're on a great path. We established that pathway to budget, and then we did an internal report out to the steering committee on the VE. But that's more or less right when our pause in the project work was directed. And so we were also directed to pause all stakeholder engagement during this cost reduction study. So we haven't really been able to report out the results of that work to our stakeholders with the project. So that's kind of pending picking up work as we move forward. I'll pause real quick if there are any questions here, and I can move on to kind of our work to present. Okay. And then so I kind of won't go through all this again because it's a lot of the same stuff. We're part of our cost reduction study, three school project team that we've kind of all come together and been working together for the last number of weeks, putting these options together to be reviewed by leadership. And so we're hoping that we'll get some direction here in the near future to what our next steps are. I'd say this is pretty much a copy of the other slides, so I won't go through that. But again, if there are any questions, happy to answer those. Okay. I've just got a kind of a draft schedule at a glance here to take a look at. 2025, we're looking to wrap up schematic design with whatever changes that we have related to reducing our costs. Right now, we're just looking at a minimum 4-month delay due to redesign, schematic design revision, and an amendment to a comprehensive plan that would establish a new budget, if that's what we're doing. And so that 4-month delay, as we're looking at our construction schedule, is just translating to kind of a 2-month issue in our construction schedule. But if we're looking at 33 months of construction, We believe that we can sequence and work with Skanska to alleviate that 2 months. And so at this point, we're saying that if we go through a revision of our design that's kind of in a minimal approach, we will be able to maintain that schedule. We are based on that we'd be starting a design development in May. If we kind of get direction again, kind of in early February, to get back to work on our design. But this is really all still contingent on the next steps direction that we get. We do need our CMGC contract approval as soon as possible so that we can get them on the team. We are under a limited services contract right now, so we do have room in that contract that they could work with us on the revisions related to any budget reductions, but then to really start the full design process, we'll need that contract approved. Chris, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi Eric. Thank you.
Hey.
I'm trying to wrap my head around the construction duration and how that translates into school years. So if it's 2 years, 9 months, would that still somehow be 2 school years, or are we talking about 3 school years at this point?
That would be 3 school years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
And then were you previously planning for the new school to open fall of 2028? So it's getting pushed back a year on the back end?
Yes, the current schedule would have it opening in fall of 29.
Oh, the current
It'd be
schedule.
pushed out. Yeah. I mean, the current schedule with the extension. So the original 2-year duration had the building opening in fall of 28.
Right.
And just the complexities and the scope of work that I was discussing, we need to add additional time to that. And so that's pushing out the back end. We can't start any earlier, unfortunately. The other thing is that, we're also tied to starting when the end of a school year occurs. So, it's a little different, say that like either Wells, I think also Jefferson and also Lincoln, we're starting on fields. So the start of construction was fluid. It could kind of start almost whenever you were ready and had a permit in hand. We can't start until we move everyone out of the building. So we're really kind of tied to a end of June start of whatever year that would be.
Okay. So just to make sure I'm understanding, as long as you get direction fairly soon, you think you can start around the same time you had previously been planning, but the back end gets pushed out another 9 months. Is that right?
That is correct. Another 9 months for construction, but then we still have our, commissioning and move in and startup, and so that would push us into that following summer. So then we would still be opening in the fall, but the fall of 29.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So then sort of at a glance then, 2026, we would have construction starting. We're looking at a phased permit process where we're doing demo and abatement permit first, and then the full building permit after that. The school program would move to the Marshall campus during construction, and then we'd have construction continuing through 27 and 29, with the school opening in fall of 2029. And just the note there, if we do have more significant reductions, to our budget that are being directed, that would cause more delay as far as having to go back and do more of a redesign effort versus making adjustments to the current design. So that would most likely cause a full year delay to the start of construction. That would push us out to potentially 2030 to open the building. And just that 1 year delay itself adds approximately $16 million of just market escalation costs. And just based on the cost of construction, and that's about a 5% escalation. And the other thing to note, we don't know yet, but we do anticipate some cost impacts related to tariffs that are being imposed as far as on certain equipment and materials that we may be getting for the project. So that's kind of unknown right now. just to give folks orientation on the site, so you see where, we've got, the building really sits on this small kind of 4 square block site. We've got our parking lot across the street. The city won't let us close 26th Avenue, which if they did, that would really help our logistics during construction, but it's a major arterial, north-south arterial, so we won't be able to close that. And as you see, the buildings were almost right up against the lot lines, and so, some of the costs related to the project are also kind of these fixed costs that we can't adjust when we're trying to reduce costs because of the soil conditions, also sort of the urban constraints that we have on the site. We have to do underground support of the right-of-way surrounding the site while we're doing construction. So that's also an added cost that would occur in any scenario. And then as you see 4 blocks away, we've got the stadium site right there. And so that's kind of our 3 different parcels that we're working on. This is a diagram kind of showing where we were at the end of schematic design, where we've got 2 sort of primary building structures that are kind of pulled apart sort of to the north and to the south, and we've opened up the center of the site to create kind of a big sort of descending courtyard and plaza space that goes from 28th Avenue down to 26th Avenue. So creating a lot of outdoor gathering space of different types for the school community, which Cleveland doesn't have and really hasn't had an open space on campus, and so this was really a great sort of design idea that the team came up with. So we're really excited about that. This is sort of a more recent rendering that we have that's looking at kind of the massing of the building. This is kind of from the northeast, so we're kind of, you can see Powell Park off in the distance there. But again, this shows the 2 sort of building structures, and we had this sort of connecting structure in between, which is a little bit more than a pedestrian bridge. It really has occupiable space in there as well. And you can see kind of the courtyard space and the landscaping through there. And then this is a view inside that courtyard space of what it might look like. Okay, so next steps would be sort of the design restart. Question from Travis.
Hey, thanks. I was just curious what the process was with the city to ask to close that block down and what their response was. Was it like a request to close the whole block down, or have it be like a little cul-de-sac just so it was just closed right between the parking lot and the school, or just a little more about that process?
Sure. So let's see, I'll go back to that site plan there. I mean, we didn't submit a kind of formal like application or process to have that reviewed. It was really in some of the conversations that we were having about the street and about what we could do and during construction. It was highly discouraged for us to make that request. So that doesn't mean it's not impossible, and that's worth asking. So I appreciate you asking the question, and I think that's we may have to provide some kind of a traffic mitigation plan or something, but because 26 it's also a bike greenway. That PBOT's really sensitive in closing that, limiting access north-south. And this, and if that's for 2 years or more, that is kind of a major impact on sort of the access and traffic, in that part of town. But
I actually
it's worth asking again.
I thought you meant actually closing it permanently so that the students and others weren't crossing the street all the time to get from their car to the building.
Well, we did ask that question. They said absolutely no. We were, as far as vacating that right of way, that was a hard no. And then we talked about closing it down during this construction. Maybe I guess that was a softer no, but it's worth continuing those conversations. There might be some ways we can mitigate closing a street temporarily, but certainly not. They were not entertaining vacating the right of way.
And is there any kind of safety, like traffic mitigation thing in mind for once the new school is in place and the new, I mean, that's could be a lot of, especially even, I mean, even with bikes going through there, I mean, there's still a risk of collision or whatever.
There is definitely, actually currently PBOT is working to, they have plans to install a mid-block crossing right there between the parking lot and the school. I mean, we're working with them and the Safe Routes to School group to do what we can to make things safer. If you see on this diagram, we're going to also be upgrading crossings between the main building and the field to make that sort of walk between the school and the field safer for pedestrians. But there certainly are concerns there have been fatalities at that intersection at 26th and Powell, and there are concerns about safety. So, we're definitely talking with PBOT about it. The mid-block crossing is going to help. There are also just kind of limitations to what we can do. I think also because it is kind of a major street as far as for traffic patterns. So there are also limitations to what can be considered for traffic calming.
Yeah. That's kind of why I asked the question, because it's like, there's limited places to get all the, like, kind of through north-south, and people cut through streets like that. So it's kind of unfortunate location for parking. Thanks.
Great. You bet. Thank you. Any other questions? I'd like to allow our next team up, but I guess I do want to make a quick note that in addition to the main project, we've also been directed to start a study of doing field improvements at Powell Park for potential improvements at the baseball kind of multi-use field there, and negotiations with start at least talks with the Portland Parks to consider improvements there for athletics, also for softball and baseball, and kind of multi-use. And we're also looking at potentially at Hosford Middle School, if we can fit a softball field there. So these are just conceptual studies that we're starting. So these aren't actual projects yet, but it's really kind of putting together a business case if it works to be able to propose those improvements. And those improvements are kind of bundled within the bond and sort of what was considered as the Cleveland High School modernization, that it was acknowledged that those field improvements were kind of also included in that overall bond piece. Okay, let's see. Let me stop sharing here. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Our next project update is our 2020 technology program updates. And Jody, do you want to present your own screen, or would you like me to do that?
I can present.
Great.
Just a quick intro. I'm Jody Shaw. Get the great opportunity to work on the Bond 2020 Tech project. I will keep this pretty quick, but I'm very excited that we've got lots of new members and fantastic questions. So I love questions. So let's see. It is. It may not let me. Let's see. Yep, I'm gonna have you share. Got extra settings on my IT laptop here. That is not letting me with Zoom specifically. So, and I think this is the same as what you've got already in your folder. So if you've got a secondary screen, looks like up on our screen right now, we've got the 2020 technology project update. So for those of you that were here in May, these pictures may look familiar. We will have more updates in our next presentation next time we get to meet. And the reason for that is we've got a lot of schools, which we'll be talking through here in a second, that we are finishing up. So, but this slide really shows a lot of different things going on. On the top left, we had, as part of Bond 2020 Tech Project, so for the new folks that are joining us, we had in scope to deploy computers to students and staff and everyone across the district. So that was our first completion as far as this project goes. So students and staff, as you can tell, the Chromebook is utilized by the students. We have desktops for the actual teaching stations. In the lower left-hand corner, you see a teaching station for the gyms. So we provided additional projectors and some tech carts for those. We've got new audio amplification microphones for the teachers and student engagement in each of the classrooms. So that's that bottom center photo of the microphone that goes around the neck for the teachers. And then we also have wall-mounted phones, which are mounted by the door for security purposes. They're all in a standardized location. And this is part of the VoIP phone system that we upgraded. Next slide, please. Okay, so a couple of things here. In the equity side of things, I'll have to double check and report back to you all on the bottom here, because there's no updates in our boxes here. So I will definitely be following up a little bit more on that, because I do know that we've had a couple contractors that have women-owned businesses. Just need to see if they actually have that certification or not. So I'll do a double check and report back. A couple of things that we've got in the caution area scope, as we mentioned from the auditors, we've had a lot of different scope changes and things like that. The budget is in caution, and that is just making sure that we are reporting out here, and we'll get into the details here in a second, equity in that caution. But the big red glaring is the schedule, and this is a couple different pieces. I think it was in August we got to meet last time, and that's where we were talking about our project going through 2029, and that is still the case. We are still planning on 2029 being through all of the schools for our technology projects here. As far as the budget goes, we are still on budget. We are making sure that we are just being as clear and concise with our projects. We switched our reporting a little bit to be tracking our fund sources here that we talked about last time, but this is really showcasing that we are planning on utilizing all of our funds that we've got available. You'll notice in the general, the other fund section, that's where we've got our general fund dollars for those non-compensable items that our auditors had mentioned. Our ERP project, Stormy had mentioned, there's additional dollars that were allocated in that particular project to get us through to that next bond for the main implementation phase. So that next bond 2025, would be that big ERP implementation ask. Our current budget does include some of that implementation phase, but most of the general funds here that are noted in that other funds column are really covering the payroll, the staffing costs in that implementation as we get closer to that ERP project. Okay, let's dive into that next slide.
Before you do that, might I?
Oh yeah. What questions do you have for me, Greg?
So you have device replacement was the current budget of 48 million, estimated now 34.
Yep.
So, and
Yeah.
and all the other categories there are higher than when we had the current budget. So what's that mean? We're not going to replace the devices as we had thought. They don't need to be replaced as often.
Yeah. Great
What's
question.
the effect
So
of that?
Yeah, so one thing with the project code 5515 device replacement, we finished up our device replacements, the student, the staff, and then we got a federal grant that came back and allowed us to get a little bit of reimbursement that went into this other funds category, which is why you see the additional funds.
Okay.
Because we've already deployed student staff, we've
Got it.
deployed the devices. And so that's where you see that other funds category showcasing that reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question though. We are definitely planning on using all of our funds for sure. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so on schedule here, we have quarter one. We are notating in white the 5515 because it was already completed. That device replacement project has already been completed. The project 5519, that's our program administration. That's going to be in planning all the way until 2029. This particular graph only shows till 2027. So we know that we're going to be working on all of our classroom modernizations and our infrastructure all the way through that time period. So simultaneously, we will be doing planning and procurement and placement as we go through that those couple of years there. And then the ERP project, which is very exciting. We are getting close to that time frame when the pre-planning stage, so that blue section, that procurement, that planning, that is wrapping up, and the hope is in the next quarter to have a software for that new ERP go to the board for review and hopefully approval, in which case that will be a huge milestone for us. And we do have some lessons that we have learned from Bond 2020, where it took a little bit of the cash to be available for the Bond 2020 to be able to utilize it. So right now in Bond 2020, we have the ERP, a little bit of the implementation covered here. And that's where you'll see that placement row notated to cover just a little bit of that implementation cost before it transfers over to that next bond, ideally. And that next bond would cover the majority of the implementation costs. We know that we can't cover all of the implementation costs. And so that's why we've just got a little bit of this yellow color here on that ERP row. Travis, you've got a question for me. What do you got?
Yeah, thanks. Just curious what the total project cost is for ERP replacement.
Yeah, great question. So for the next bond or current in Bond 2020?
The entire project from beginning to end, regardless of which bond it's funded with.
Got it. Okay. So on the screen right now is where we are at with our current Bond 2020 tech funding. That next bond, I believe, has is going to be going to the voters. I do know that the initial numbers have been submitted to the board. Stormy, do we have that officially out yet? Are we able to announce what's in that?
Yeah, the board has voted to refer that bond to the voters for the May election.
Okay, perfect. So in the next bond 2025 ask would be 38 million for the ERP implementation cost for that project. That's the next bond. That's the implementation. We knew we didn't have enough funds to be able to do all of that in Bond 2020 tech. And so that's where that
62 million.
Yep. And here we also have added general fund. So that total estimate at completion is not, we've got the bond funds notated, and then we've got our general funds, which have been paying for the majority of the planning stage up until the board reviews the software and signs off on it. Then it will become bond compensable. But yeah.
Oh, but is that 5 million included in what you just said of what did you say, 38 million in the next in 2025?
Yes. So the 38 million that's in the bond 2025 ask, that is all implementation for the ERP project. That is totally separate funding for that implementation. What you see on the screen right here, this is what has been earmarked for bond 2020 to cover some of that implementation cost, but most with the other funds, that 5,195,000, that is the general funds that have paid for the majority of the pre-planning stage of this ERP project. Because it's not bond compensable quite yet until we get the new software and it's signed off by the Board of Education. Does that make sense?
Okay, so the 5.2 or whatever will eventually be funded with the 2020 bond fund.
Yep, the 38 million, our hope is that in the next bond that's hopefully going to the voters in May 2025 would include that bulk of that ERP funding.
I think Charles, you might be asking if the bond will ever reimburse these other funds.
Oh, gotcha. Totally separate funding sources.
The 38 million would be in addition to the 18.7 million from the 2020 bond and in addition to the 5.2 million general funds.
Right.
This actuals to date of 4.7 million is maybe all general fund so far. Yeah.
Okay, so back to my original total 62-ish million, 38 plus 24.2.
Yeah, because in there's software, but also staffing to be able to do the implementation. So it's not just the software, but getting to it.
And do you know the scope of the ERP system? Is it meant to cover
massive.
Which systems is it covering?
Yeah, so it would cover it. So everybody's on the same page. The ERP system is what we have it titled here. It is the backbone of everything the district does financially, right? So it's working on HR, it's used by finance, it's used by literally every single department. It is going to be getting us up to speed. Our current system is over 20 years old, so we want to make sure that we are getting it up to speed. But because of that, it does have a longer ramp up period because every single department is connected to it, every single financial system, every single HR system. So that's very connected to all the different departments. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that next bond passes. Yep. Yeah, so it looks like Chris has got a note. Similar to what's being done with the high school modernization, is the cost for the ERP project being benchmarked against similar projects at other schools? Oh, interesting question. I don't know, Stormy, was this in a benchmark survey?
No, like for example, I don't think our auditors looked at that in the 2020 tech bond audit last year.
Yeah, I don't know if this ERP is benchmarked against other schools, but I do know that the consultants that are working on it have worked with other school districts. And so there's a little bit more of that visibility from their previous work in that sector as well. Kara, it looks like you got a question. And I know you've specifically asked about this area of expertise for a little bit, so.
I'm just trying to remember way back in the beginning of time, 2020. Was The ERP implementation was never part of the 2020 bond, correct? It was always just the planning portion?
Yeah, great question. So I joined in August 2021. So a little bit before my time, the bond was created, and it was decided early on that Bond 2020 passed. Steering committee reviewed everything, saw what was available, realistically made the switch from the beginning to say, we need to put some general fund dollars into make available to cover costs, because most of the work, we have a lot of pre-planning work that is not going to be bond compensable until it gets signed off for that new software. So from the very beginning, it was decided most of Bond 2020 was going to be focused on the planning and the pre-implementation phase.
That's right. I remember that now, because then it seemed like there was a lot of money that was going to be left in the program in 2021. And that's where all like the rest of the security and all the things that tied into the tech from a modernization standpoint. Okay, thank you. I was just trying to remember what the original scope was, but it seems like a lifetime ago. Thank you.
I know there's been a lot going on. And with this project in particular, because there is so much that is based around the ERP system, it is so vital. And therefore, we want to make sure that we've got all of the teams in play. We've got all of the things planned out as we get closer to that implementation. That should be going to the board in the next quarter or so, which we are really excited about, because there's been a lot of planning, obviously, and a lot of work that's gone into it. And we want to make sure that we're getting started on it, that implementation, because we need it as soon as possible. But we know that it's going to take a little bit of time. Once it is implemented, it's going to take a little bit of time to get that moving as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. And let's go on to the next slide. So this next slide is going to showcase, yep, we've got our schedule. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so this is our accomplishments, kind of a little catch up for the new folks. We finished that device replacement. In 2021, we've got our teaching station project. So the difference, device replacement included the students and the staff having mobile devices, and administrators, all within that very first several years, once we had the bond funding available. Our teaching station is a little different. That is where there's a desktop computer and monitor, and that is in every single classroom. So we just wrapped that up at all of the schools. And then we have our classroom technology. So that's going to include our wall-mounted light speed, wall-mounted projector, AirTame. That also includes our infrastructure project includes a wall-mounted phone and Wi-Fi improvements and fiber cabling. So because of our previous presentations, Jackson, Wells, and Cleveland are on the path for new buildings. Therefore, the Jefferson, Wells, and Cleveland were earmarked just for wall-mounted phone and infrastructure and Wi-Fi improvements. Jefferson was completed. Wells and Cleveland will be completed and going live this month for their Wi-Fi being more stable, wall-mounted phone location being a standardized spot. And then we have our full classroom technology in infrastructure projects, and we've got that completed at Boise Lane. George just got completed with the final patch and paint just recently, and then Markham was able to be started and opened before the students arrived back this January 2025. That is a lot of work, but there's even more on the next slide. So this is what we are also already completed hardware-wise for the classroom tech and infrastructure, and we are currently in the process of getting it patched, painted, Wi-Fi patched. So this is going to all be live very, very soon. So we've got Caesar, Roseway Heights, Meek, King, Green Thumb, Roseway Heights. Looks like I added that in twice. My bad on that. That was definitely part of, and it looks like I had Meek on there twice too. Both Roseway Heights and Meek were in our school group too. And then Youngston's part of that school group 3. Jackson, we just finished up our WAP installation, cabling. We still got a little bit more to go with Jackson. Gray, we are just starting the new installations there for classroom tech. We just got into that school. And as I noted, the ERP project is in the final stages of the planning and pre-implementation work. Our additional schools that we're currently in the process of are Sabin, Creston, Chief Joseph, and those are still in that school group 4, still in the implementation phase. But the ones that you see on the screen right now are hardware completely in. We are still working at Chief Joseph, Sabin, and Creston at the hardware installation stage. So a lot of work finishing up here, and really excited to see essentially school group 1 through 4 being able to wrap up this quarter, which is amazing. And I think, yeah, so we've got a couple risks, and this went back to why I put into the schedule in red. So Chapman, we had our IDIQ contractors, they ran out of time before the contract ended. So we are going to be going out for a new RFP for contractors, and we'll get back into Chapman to do the rest of the work that's needed there. And then we are also going to be going out to for an RFP for an architectural firm to be able to join us working on the project all the way through 2029. This is going to allow us to be faster on the design phase, and then also be have more partners on our team to be able to work through all of the schools, because we are very much diving into the details, but we need more help on our making sure that we've got our project schedule completed at all of the schools by 2029, which is still definitely still in the plan, but having those additional architects on board will help us. As some of you know, since some of you are from architectural firms. And that's it. Any additional questions? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Jody. All right, our last item on the agenda, the regular agenda, unless there are additional items the committee wants to discuss, is the work plan for the year for the BAC. So this is in the middle of last year, I think we had decided on a cadence of January, April, July, and October. So I took a shot at dates for those meetings, and they are typically the third Wednesday, is it, in the month? So that correlates well with our board meetings that we often have to be at that are on Tuesday evenings. We don't typically have board meetings on Wednesday nights, so that works well for us here at PPS. And as historically, we've done one virtual meeting and then one in-person meeting and virtual and so on. And so I wanted to ask if that is how you all would like to continue, or if you would like to do more in-person or more virtual. Easy for us either way. The advantage of being in person is you get snacks, and that we get to visit different sites around the district, and we often get to go to sites where projects have recently been completed, and then you get to walk and tour those completed projects. So also included on here are some proposed dates for sending your BAC report to the board. These are board meeting dates, and so they seem like they're a long time from the actual BAC meeting date, but you all need some time to write the report, and then we actually have to get materials to the board before their board meetings like 3 weeks in advance. So there is kind of a long lag time in between when you would actually complete the report and when it would be on the board's agenda. And so previously the BAC reports were delivered to the board through the Facilities and Operations Committee, but that committee is no longer a regularly scheduled committee meeting. It's an ad hoc committee meeting. So that those only get scheduled when there is a specific item that the board wants to hear about from OSM. And so it's not a reliable way to deliver these reports to the board any longer. So what we will be doing is delivering it to the board directly, and it probably won't be an agenda item. It may just be an attachment onto the board's agenda as a reference material or additional material. But with the 2025 bond coming up, it's possible that the board will have some kind of renewed interest in hearing from you all more directly or having it presented in some way. So we don't know. We don't know yet, but it won't be delivered to the board through the Facilities and Operations Committee any longer.
I got a comment on that, Stormy.
Mm-hmm.
A couple things. One, of course, those of us that have been on a long time really took issue with the fact that it went through the facility committee, because if you looked at our charge, we were to report to the Board of Education, not to a subgroup of them. So we took offense at that, frankly, but it didn't make any difference. Secondly, I do like the in-person meeting, because even though we're on the call tonight, I can't talk to any of these people on the side, get to know them, form a working relationship. And frankly, it's one of the reasons I volunteer for some of these committees in my community. Third, I understand that the cost reduction things go into the superintendent, and then she's going to decide what to do with it. But I do think that we ought to be a recipient of that report. And I don't know if we wait till April, we're certainly not going to be able to, well, I don't know what we're going to do, but we may want to weigh in on those cost reductions as well, because that's part of what our job is as reviewers of this program here. So we need to make sure that gets on our agenda at some point, that we review those cost reductions and see how they line up with the costs that we're going to do for these programs, as well as the education spec.
Yeah, I think we do sometimes have special meetings, right? We had one in December to talk about the methodology behind the 2025 bond budget planning. So that could be something that the board wants to ask the BAC for their input on, is the the kind of methodology around the cost saving study. So I could see having a special meeting around that. That is before the April meeting.
I don't know if you can see hands up, Stormy, but
yep.
I don't know who was first.
I think you're next.
Okay. I just want to second, I put in the chat too, but I like in person for a quarterly meeting. It's doesn't seem like it's overly onerous to get in person once a quarter. And I agree that the benefits of it are, I think, really, really beneficial. I think being able to talk on the side, get to know each other, and especially for the new members like myself, seeing that there's a quarterly report due and having no idea what the process is for putting that together, sharing information between the members and finalizing it and all that stuff. It's the sort of thing that's very easy to talk on the side after a meeting or before the meeting or whatever, and very or not very, but relatively difficult to do in a meeting like this. So I would maybe ask that maybe we could put that question to the whole group, because I know a few people have dropped off, when we are in person at the next meeting, and see where we want to go from there. And then I guess my only other comment was just I guess a request that we could figure out a good way to kind of get the new members just some basic information about what goes into the report, what we're kind of what's expected of us, what we need to do, all that kind of stuff. I see.
Kara's waving wildly. Yes, so for the veteran committee members, Dan and I did do orientation meetings with the new members to go over kind of the public meeting rules, what the BAC charter is, what the scope of the bonds are, how the materials look, and sort of what the expectations of the committee members are. We did not go over how you all produce the report. So Kara, waving wildly, sounds like you are really willing to do that. I want to make sure that you remember that the committee reports to the Board of Education and is therefore subject to public meeting rules. So anytime that you are meeting to discuss BAC business, if you have a quorum, which for this group I believe would be 5 members, then it would need to be a public meeting with the correct public notices. So if you're going to do that, Kara, please do it in small groups.
All I did was ask Dan if we could meet 30 minutes earlier in April so that the new members and the old members could get to know each other, because I apologize that I was not aware that we had the new members tonight. So that is my bad. I would have sent out a note to welcome people. So sorry about that. So if we could get together a little bit before the next meeting, that would be helpful for 30 minutes of communication. And Travis, we have a report format that aligns directly with the BAC charter and what we're supposed to answer. And the chair or the designee puts that together. So I have 2 outstanding. I was working on it while we were in the meeting, so I was capturing it real time. I'll drop in the 2 things that I still need information on, and then I will send that out to the rest of the BAC with tracking to edit, suggest, whatnot. And I'll also send out the last one from October that went to the board so that you can kind of see how we track and what goes into the report. But it really does, it took us a while. Norm's going to know this, and Greg more than I am probably, but it took several iterations to get to a report that was consistent, that we felt comfortable, actually answered the questions. And it's, 7 pages long, and you'll have that, I hope by tomorrow, but by Sunday at the latest.
Thanks. I also, as part of what both of you just said, I asked Dan also for some clarification on email correspondence between all of the members. I don't know. I in past experience, there have been some restrictions on the entire group being on an email or things like that, and discussing business. So I just want to put that out there in case there is something there that we're not supposed to.
Yes, there are
line we're
limitations.
not supposed to cross.
There are limitations on email correspondence as well, just the same as speaking verbally. So yeah, if you're discussing BAC business, it really needs to be in the public meetings boundaries, I guess.
Okay. It's pretty hard to not talk on email when you're putting together a report like that and sending it in email. So just any kind of clarification on that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be helpful, because we've never had this many people on the BAC in my history.
Got it.
Yeah, we can get some updates on some guidance on that. And I know that our board manager does have some recorded public meetings training available that I'm gonna go through as a reminder for myself also. And I think I could share that with you all if you're interested in watching that.
I mean, the basic question is, Kara's going to put the report together. She's going to send it out for a comment from all of us, and which, look this over. Does it look right? So the question is, can we do that without, and I think we can, because we're not then going back and forth. If we start going back and forth, now we're deliberating, and deliberating then requires the meeting. But if all we're going to do is provide our comments to Kara, I believe we can do that. I mean, because that's all, we're not deliberating, which is the key.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep. Yep, I agree with that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Norm, what you got?
Oh, just real quickly, I'm all for in-person meetings. I think that'd be great. And if possible, in addition, Greg talked about if we could get a copy of the cost reduction studies, it'd be great if possible to get that Cornerstone report that's going to be coming out. I think that's going directly to the board, not through you. So I don't know, but I think
Yeah,
I'm very interested in seeing that.
It's the superintendent's report. She owns it and it is hers to share with the board. Yep. As far as the work plan goes, does anybody see any showstoppers here in the schedule? So it mirrors kind of what we have done in 2024. So we've got today's meeting, then we would have April 23rd, July 23rd, which is my birthday actually, and October 23rd. And so again, we would be kind of oscillating between technology, modernizations, and then alternating with curriculum and then infrastructure type projects and capacity projects. And then hopefully starting in July, we would be starting to report on the 2025 program, assuming that that bond passes in May. Any showstoppers there for anybody? All right.
Does that mean we can adjourn the meeting?
So unless there's any other questions or comments from the committee.
I do need to tell you, I'll be absent at the next meeting on the 23rd. I'm in Hawaii for 3 weeks, so.
Oh,
Greg, not acceptable.
Fire me.
I think you've earned that too.
Hawaii definitely wins.
Thank you all for sticking through this kind of extended meeting. I really appreciate the questions and comments, especially from the new members. It's takes some courage to stick your neck out when you're new, so I appreciate it. And welcome to everybody.
Yeah.
Are we
All right.
adjourned, Kara?
I was like, do I get to say it? The meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you all very much. We look forward to seeing you again in April.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.